Welcome to the Slippery Slope podcast. I'm Jay Fallon. Today, we're looking at a story out of Canada that perfectly captures the internal contradictions of modern progressive politics and why the ideology of equity always collapses under its own weight. Last week, Canada's new Democratic Party held what was supposed to be a unifying national convention in Winnipeg. The theme was predictable: progressive politics, shared values, shaping the future, all the usual slogans. But instead of unity, the whole thing descended into chaos. Why? Because the NDP decided to hand out something I've never really heard of before. They called equity cards. These were color-coded badges meant to identify members of so-called marginalized groups and give them special privileges, including priority access to microphones during debates. Yes, a major political party in a Western democracy literally created a system where people were ranked by identity to determine who gets to speak first. Oh, the irony. And shockingly, or maybe not shockingly at all, the system blew up almost immediately. One delegate was furious because she claimed she was skipped in the speaking queue despite holding a gender equity card and standing at the microphone. A transgender delegate complained that a cisgender woman had spoken over her, insisting her rights are under attack. A black woman argued that her equity card has no value outside this space, which might be the most honest statement of the entire weekend. Even the conference chair, who identifies as non-binary, snapped at a delegate for addressing them as Madam Chair. Can you imagine being so committed to identity politics that even basic parliamentary language becomes offensive? What was supposed to be a polished display of progressive unity turned into a chaotic competition over who is the most marginalized, who deserves the most special treatment, and who has the most moral authority to speak. This is the inevitable outcome of a worldview built on equity, not equality. Equality says everyone gets the same opportunity. Equity says we will engineer outcomes by elevating some and suppressing others. And once you start dividing people into categories and assigning privileges based on identity, you create a system where the loudest fights aren't about ideas, they're about status within the oppression hierarchy. The NDP didn't just host a political conference, they hosted a live demonstration of the internal contradictions of their own ideology. What the Bible actually says about equality. Here's the part that progressives never want to talk about. The Bible speaks directly to the issue of equality, and it does not support this modern equity framework. The New Testament condemns favoritism and partiality outright. Ephesians 6:9, James 2:1, James 2:9. Scripture is crystal clear. Favoritism corrupts justice. Paul even warned Timothy that maintaining fairness is a sacred responsibility. Keep these instructions without partiality, he says, and do nothing out of favoritism. 1 Timothy 5:21. In other words, God doesn't tell us to elevate certain groups above others. He tells us to treat people without favoritism because every person is accountable before him. The Bible also teaches that every human being has intrinsic value, dignity, and worth because we are made in the image of God. Genesis 1:26-27. That's real equality, not manufactured outcomes, not identity hierarchies, not color-coded privilege cards. Even when Scripture acknowledges differences between nations, roles, or social positions, it never diminishes the dignity of any person. God's standard is consistent: equal worth, equal accountability, equal moral responsibility. And then there's Jesus. Jesus was equal with God the Father, yet he didn't cling to that status or use it for personal advantage. Philippians 2 says he did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing, taking the nature of a servant. So Jesus did not play the victim. He didn't demand special treatment. He didn't insist on privilege. He laid down his rights to serve others. He experienced persecution, unequal treatment, and suffering, yet he never weaponized his identity to gain power over others. That's the biblical model, not entitlement, not grievance, not identity-based privilege. So while the NDP was busy handing out equity cards and arguing over who deserved the microphone, Scripture gives us a completely different picture. No favoritism, no partiality, equal dignity for all people, humility instead of entitlement, service instead of status seeking. The chaos in Winnipeg wasn't just political dysfunction. It was a worldview clash, a collision between man-made identity hierarchies and God's design for human worth. As always, this is just my opinion. I'm Jay Fallon. Thanks for listening to the Slippery Slope podcast.
Got my eyes straight ahead, got my head in the game. With the red light on, I'm just waiting for the change. Keep my head down low.